Momentum can be looked at as making progress and building upon that progress so that each day when you wake up in the morning, you're ready to face the day-to-day journey to making a contribution to your vision, whatever it may be, the activities, the creative expression, the practice, the learning, and so forth. This appreciation for this day-to-day journey builds what we call momentum. Now, momentum is a feeling. It's a feeling of achievement, a feeling of internal power. It's a feeling of connection, being one with our experience, and allowing the creativity or intuitive understanding from within ourselves to express automatically on what we are expressing on, be it the entrepreneurial endeavor, the artistic expression, or day-to-day life. To look at life as a day-to-day expression, authentic expression. We can also relate this to what I titled this mind map here as allowing versus forcing. We're going to relate this over to the 7 stages of spiritual alchemy. Upon going into the works of James Allen, I've recognized the connections that he has to some of the ancient mystic texts dating all the way back from times of ancient Egypt. We see it in the words and we see it in the insights, and so much of personal development information is tracked back as far as its roots go to ancient Egyptian wisdom, which a person can definitely go through those texts if they would like to. One of the famous being the Emerald Tablets, and recognizing as well that there are many translations of the Emerald Tablets. And just as there are many translations to the Emerald Tablets, there's also different translations expressed in certain works. For example, we're going to look at the 7 stages of the spiritual alchemy process, which I've also discussed in one of my previous videos. I'll put a link in the description to that. And what I find amazing is just how much the essence of the 7 stages of spiritual alchemy process has been captured by James Allen in his book, The Heavenly Life. So I've pulled together some quotes and we're going to discuss it. But to kick off this discussion, let's look at what we're looking to do, which is essentially integrating what we talked about in our last Neville Goddard video, which was on Sunday, which is also built upon the previous few videos, which is loyalty to the unseen reality, the unseen vision as present fact, and living from that perspective. This is how we build momentum. Now, the momentum is a journey, so a person can step into the momentum and continue to build a momentum, or they could experience what we call challenges of maintaining the momentum. So that's what we're also going to discuss. Let's reflect upon this quote here, which is the premise of our conversation. He says, "Past and future are dreams. Now is a reality. All things are now. All power, all possibility, all action is now. Not to act and accomplish now is not to act and accomplish at all. To live in thoughts of what you might have done, or in dreams of what you mean to do, this is folly. But to put away regret, to anchor anticipation, and to do and to work now, this is wisdom." This is another way of saying what we said in our last video, which is unseen as present fact, expressing from the premise of the vision right now. If a person has challenges doing this and building the momentum each day, then they can value of recognizing that there are different stages of this spiritual alchemy process that we go through. And what we're experiencing within ourselves is perhaps one of these stages on the way to realizing the vision. And so this brings us a degree of internal peace, knowing that this is part of the journey, the process of realizing the vision. First part of the process is calcination. Here's where a person starts letting go of egotism, self-doubt, in which James Allen says it, Let a man put away egotism, and he will see the universe in all its beauty of its pristine simplicity. Let him annihilate the delusion of the personal I, and he will destroy all the illusions which spring from that I. He will thus re-become a little child and will revert to original simplicity. So on the journey to bringing forth our vision, we are realizing original simplicity. We may be dealing with large volumes of complexity, be it in information, ideas, perspectives that seem to show up in our mind, or information that we're consuming. However, the most relevant information is what is ideal and in contribution to our vision. And by letting go of certain kinds of thinking, which is really what this stage implies, a person starts to destroy, of what he says here, the delusions of the personal I, which is certain concepts in relation to what he refers to as egotism. So, as we let go of these aspects of ourselves, we go down the process, the next phase, which is called dissolution. In this phase, personal responsibility is kept into consideration. A person takes responsibility that they're the ones, in other words, this journey is about building a relationship with yourself and the world within, in relation to the day-to-day journey on the way to bringing forth a vision. So in other words, if certain aspects, as we say here, avoidance of past traumatic memories or other inner resistance elements are brought to the surface, they're brought to the surface for purification. Sometimes you hear me say this, purification of the mind. So James Allen articulates it really well, where he says, "Thus thou hast trials. Every outward trial is a replica of an inward imperfection. Thou shalt grow wise by knowing this, and shalt thereby transmute trial into active joy, finding the kingdom where trial cannot come." So we're moving into the direction of the kingdom, which is experienced as sometimes referred to as heaven on earth, where one feels so one with the world that they automatically and authentically express ideas, hunches, and inspirations. Creative expressions seem to flow automatically. You have a vision. You're able to bring it forth, transcending certain interpretations and past limited perspectives on time and space. And when he refers to as inward imperfection, it's really about recognizing that these inward imperfections are certain ways of thinking. And the responsibility really is releasing from that thinking to bring forth the divine perfection, which is the true essence, which is the whole process of this spiritual alchemy journey. Which brings us into the very last stage, which is one with the divine. Inner world and outer world are not different, but reflections of one another, seen as one. So in this stage of the journey, a person recognizes that momentum is built further by removing from certain kinds of inaccurate thinking in relation to themselves, in relation to the vision. And we do this primarily by working with the subconscious mind work. And in essence, we can work with what I refer to as the four modalities that I've put together on my journey that I've worked with since I read Think and Grow Rich, which, by the way, I believe as well was also inspired by ancient alchemical wisdom, such as the case why he brought up transmutation in there. These words are borrowed from these kinds of philosophies that existed for thousands of years and have been interpreted in many different ways. And we want to go through this journey while consuming this information so we could put two and two together within ourselves and connect the dots in a way that's relatable to us. Otherwise, this information may seem too divergent and confusing, when in actuality, it makes sense to the person that relates each attribute of the journey over to the information that they're learning, and also consuming the right amount of information that's relevant and in harmony with the vision, rather than being overwhelmed by it. Which, by the way, all of this can be looked at as an ongoing journey that can happen to each goal and vision realize. You may be in different parts of these journey aspects, these different stages. So this is the stage of letting go of certain kind, making peace with certain traumatic aspects within the self or internal resistance-based elements within. And as he says here, transmute these trials into active joy. Now, a few ways of going about doing this. Number one is to value the experience. Don't run away from it. Stay committed and enjoy the experience of the learning. Perhaps it's a certain skill. And maybe you find yourself being overwhelmed and challenged by that skill. However, when you recognize that there is value in staying committed to the challenge at hand, what you do is you find creative ways to overcome that challenge. It could be some information that you come across, some hunch, some inspiration. This is where we stay committed until we feel the resolution within with that trial, and thus then have transmuted it into active joy. The next stage is called separation. So this is where what is authentic and true to you is brought to the surface. This is really how you want to be, how you want to represent. We've been calling this through our Neville Goddard conversations, the first-class concept of self, which is how you really want to be. So James Allen says, man evolves outward to the periphery of complexity and then involves backwards to the central simplicity. He then starts upon the way which leads to the original simplicity. So the original simplicity really refers to as seeing that this outer world is an expression of the world within. And what we want to do is recognize that through the lens of where we look at this outer world experience, the five sensory, the day-to-day, be it people, environment, circumstance, and information, is revealing to us of what is true within ourselves or what is aspects that we want to take responsibility for to making peace with, so we could see it more from an accurate perspective. So we're essentially segmenting here at this stage and seeing what is true and what is not true. So in relation to building momentum and maintaining it, if a person continues to build momentum, then we would say, okay, that's ideal. But if they have challenges building this momentum each day, then they might look at some of the things that have happened on the experiences and say, how did I represent as far as thinking goes in relation to these particular experiences that I had with people, with information and so forth? Was I reactive? Was I unnecessarily operating from a place of force within, which was expressed as force-based convoluted behavior? Upon reflection of this understandings that they've brought forth, they can then go back into the internal journey of reconciliation, which is making peace within themselves. And in relation to the four modalities that I referred to, I work with subconscious mind audio, self-talk, revision, and environments. Now, you can find a way that works for you. Certainly, one of the simplest ways of doing it is to be able to use conversations or the internal dialogue within ourselves to reconcile and make peace with certain attributes that create unnecessary complexity, which seems to, via that kind of thinking, create an impression of inward imperfection, which thus then what ends up happening as a result of that is we identify with those attributes which aren't necessarily true to us. So we feel inauthentic. Now, this is experienced on the journey of expression, creative expression. So when you're expressing your art or you're communicating, if you feel inauthentic in the artistic expression or the communication, then upon deeper reflection, we'll realize we're identifying with certain kinds of thinking. For example, let's say a person had an opportunity to have a conversation with their friends about something that was very meaningful to them, something that they wanted to achieve, a goal or a vision. And for whatever the reason may be, it seems that the friends didn't agree with them, that they were able to commit to that and see it all the way to completion. This person then starts to identify with that kind of way of thinking. The way of thinking may be something like, oh, if I have a goal, I have a hard time seeing it into completion because when I look back in my past, I wasn't able to do it, and thus was validated by my friends who saw that attribute within me. This is an attribute that exists within myself that I identify with. The reality is the person is identifying with that attribute, and they're living from that attribute's perspective. And it's expressed in the different things that they do. each day and creating unnecessary complexity and convolution. So thus they can release from it by recognizing that they can, if they want to, identify with that attribute, or they can identify with a different attribute. Through this internal dialogue and self-talk, and working with perhaps some of the subconscious mind modalities, or a person's own subconscious mind modality. And it's important to find one that works for you and use it and stay committed to it, because the more you use it, the more it tends to work. For me, self-talk being one of the most powerful, along with audio affirmations. So number 4, conjunction. Accept and integrate the parts of your authentic self. So once the aspects of yourself through cause and effect reflection, which is the process I just outlined, which is looking at what those things that aren't true about you, changing the narrative in relation to what's true about you. Once those what is true about you aspects are brought to the surface, we begin to integrate, and that's called the conjunction. Now, James Allen articulates it by saying, say to yourself, I would live in my ideal now. I will manifest my ideal now. I will be my ideal now. And all that tempts me away from my ideal, I will not listen to. I will listen only to the voice of my ideal, thus resolving and thus doing. You shall not depart from the highest and shall eternally manifest the true. So, what we want to do as far as momentum goes is to recognize and value the different aspects of the journey, which we would call, sometimes I refer to this as flow breakers, things that break your flow. Recommend watching my series on flow. And seeing those aspects as opportunities, seeing reactivity as opportunities, seeing the different aspects of how you emotionally integrate within yourself as an opportunity to understand yourself. At a certain level, accept that we are identifying with those attributes, and then recognize that we are transcendent to those attributes so that we can release from them and integrate the parts that are true to the authentic self. And you'll know which ones they are, because those are the ones that resonate with you. You feel right with them. Now, the next stage is fermentation. This is where we deepen our connection to the inner voice or the inner world while detaching from certain past identifications. So the journey continues. It's articulated really well here by James Allen with this distinction when he says, said a great teacher to his disciples, those who shall be a lamp unto themselves, relying upon themselves only, and not relying upon any external help, but holding fast to the truth as their lamp, and seeking their salvation in the truth alone, shall not look for assistance to any besides themselves. It is they amongst my disciples who shall reach the very topmost height, but they must be willing to learn. So there are stages of the journey, and in the journey, there are the earlier stages where we generally tend to look for answers in the external, books, teachers, mentors, and so forth. And nothing wrong with that. What we find as we continue this spiritual alchemy process is we find more of the answers within ourselves. So it is not to shame a person for looking in the external or the internal for answers and saying one's better than the other. Well, we recognize that during this process, as a person starts to build this internal relationship with themselves, relying upon themselves, and they continue to find the answers within themselves. This part of the process also furthers the momentum on the day-to-day journey. For example, a person may find themselves being confused as to what to do one day where they were feeling in flow the 5 or 6 or 7 days prior to that. And they pause for a moment and say, I can find my ideal answers within myself. I trust it. Maybe this is an opportunity for finding this within myself. And perhaps then they go back into the mood, which was discussed a couple videos ago. I'll put a link in the description by using any of those 7 ways that I had mentioned. One being meditation or going for a walk. And they get back into more of a flow-based alpha state of mind in which they find the answers within themselves and the insight and perspective that allows them to integrate to what they're doing, whatever that may be, and move that objective all the way to completion, or finish that project, or finish the artwork, or finish the music, or so forth. And this is something that is true in this stage of realization. When we are recognizing more of this happening, we're actually going into a deeper level of integration with this understanding that we find the answers within ourselves. And this continues to build a momentum. There was a mentor when I was in corporate. They had an IT business, and the company that I was working for brought them in to consult. for our company. They were putting in a wireless network and troubleshooting the wireless networks at our distribution center because we were having some technical issues that were, you could say, quite advanced technologically, and we needed to figure it out for the logistic aspect of the business. So they were brought in, they were able to solve it, and I built a relationship with them because I wanted to understand how they were doing what they're doing. They seemed very smooth, everything in the dealing, the operations, they were able to figure it out, and they were able to build a relationship with the company where the company that I was working for actually gave them more deals. So I wanted to get to know them, and they were entrepreneurs. That was their business that they owned. They were some of the inspiring people that I met in my life that encouraged me to go down the pathway. Now, when I left, they took me out for lunch, and they sat down with me, and they gave me some insights, and they wanted me to do some deals with them actually as well, since they knew I was going to go out connecting with other businesses, and there was probably going to be some opportunities for partnership. Now, about a year later, I met up with him, and he said to me, he's like, you have a really good momentum going. And he said, what you want to do is you want to keep this momentum going because that's how you're going to get more opportunities. That's how your business is going to grow. He's like, when I reflect back on my journey, there were times where I had this level of momentum that you have right now. And right now I would say that I don't have this momentum, but you're inspiring me to build it up again. And so what he was saying to me was that momentum was allowing him to bring forth a lot of different opportunities, progress, innovation, creativity, and so forth. And that's what got him to the level of success, although it was something that he recognized was worth investing as far as attention goes on so that we can continue to be in the momentum and continue to build it. And, I didn't really keep that into consideration to the depth that I keep into consideration this momentum concept now since 2017 when I discovered that flow was the way. When I look back at my past, when I made the most progress, it was because of flow. And I've shared the story many times. I was in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and I sat down and I had a realization while I was in an alpha state of mind, which was listening to this internal connection within myself as I was going deeper into this fermentation stage. I recognized that when I was the most effective, fun, flow, ease, allowing, as we're working with here, versus forcing, and building momentum, was when I was integrating the information that we discuss in relation to flow. And during the times where I was identifying with overthinking, that's when I was making the least amount of progress. So I made a commitment to myself that I was going to stay with it. And then I understood the importance of what he was bringing up to me at that earlier stages. And we always say this, hindsight is 20/20. However, now I encourage everyone to make a commitment to getting into the momentum and maintaining the momentum, because then this kind of information that we're talking about here makes even more sense and equally as important. And so this information will be, in a practical way, be integrated to produce the results that you want, allowing these things to happen. So next we get into distillation, which is essentially integrating the realizations into our life in order to allow them to become permanent, a way of being, identified with the self-image, and finding love and flow in all things. So James Allen says, wisdom, which is the aim of every philosophy, is distinct from all philosophy. The unfailing wisdom is found only by constant practice in pure thinking and well-doing, by harmonizing one's mind and heart to those things which are beautiful, lovable, and true. So this is where we observe this commitment that we went on when we started this journey, which was letting go of certain self-doubt or egotism-based aspects to then move into a place of recognizing that we were identifying with these things from our past, dissolution, so that we could release from them, find the authentic, true attributes within ourselves that is in harmony with the vision and the first-class concept of self, accept and integrate those parts into the authentic self to the point where it becomes who we really are. And then what happens is we listen to the internal guidance or intuition within ourselves, inner voice. We find more hunches, insights, and perspectives to express and thus continue to build the momentum on the day-to-day journey. And as a result, these attributes that we are encouraging through these behaviors, through this way of thinking, become who we are. And we then move into coagulation, which is one with the divine. Inner world and outer world are not different, but reflections of each other as one. This is one of the important attributes of what the ancient alchemists used to strive for, the unity with the divine. So James Allen refers to this in this quote where he says, standing up upon the imperishable principles of purity, compassion, wisdom, and love, they are immortal, and know that they are immortal. They are one with God, and know that they are one with God. Seeing the realities of things, they can find no room anywhere for condemnation. So as mentioned over the last handful of videos, one of the things we want to release from is identification with shame, condemning ourselves, which is then expressed as condemning others, shaming others, creating unnecessary complexity and convolution. You could say that's one of the important aspects of what you could say internally the identification is from within prevents someone. The preventing is happening within, or prevents a person from getting into and maintaining the momentum. Because they're identifying with certain kinds of thinking, a lot of times related to the shame-based way of thinking, which when they run it through a process like this, which by the way happens automatically, this spiritual alchemy process was what the ancients have put together to articulate what was the process everybody was going through as they realize a vision, as they continue to eventually go into a place of unity with the divine. So all of this is happening now. So the key to maintaining momentum is to value the now. Recognize we go back all the way to the beginning here when he says, past and future are dreams. Now is a reality. All things are now. All power, all possibility, all action is now. Not to act and accomplish now is not to act and accomplish at all. There's a lot of wisdom in that particular quote. To say I'm going to do something tomorrow is to affirm that you're going to do something tomorrow. To say you're going to do it now is to say that you're going to live from that ideal state of mind that's one with the vision and representing the unseen as present fact. And then so in the entrepreneurial journey, we say pick the next task, find flow in it, see it all the way to completion. Because as you do it, let's go through this process here. You'll let go of the egotism, self-doubt. You may find certain aspects within yourself in relation to what you're identifying from your past. So you can make peace with it using the subconscious mind work so you could release from it if you recognize it's not resonant to the authentic and true you. And as you identify more so with the true you attributes by being deeply engaged in the task at hand from a place of flow, again, working with the flow-based ways of doing things, because then what happens is we're practicing more allowing and expressing rather than forcing things to happen, allowing and expressing, then more of the authentic self-based attributes are brought to the surface for further integration. As we continue to do this, we build a deeper relationship with ourselves, thus bringing forth a deeper connection with the inner world and intuition. And as this continues, the distillation, which is the integration of the inner realizations, allows this information to become more permanent in who we are. And thus, as a result, we automatically find love and flow because we found more peace within ourselves. And we experience more of the coagulation, one with the divine, deep states of flow, which we're calling autotelic, or one with. And it becomes more so every day as a way of being. Another reason why we want to value the journey as much as we value the destination. As mentioned before, I value the journey and the destination. I see them as one. The journey and destination is one because all of it happens in the eternal now. And so, although we experience a day-to-day journey to the realization, or sometimes realization within the day, we actually are in the process making peace with all the different aspects of what we call the journey to the vision, recognizing that they are either known some way, somehow in contribution. And you can refer back to last Sunday's video where I talk about another known factor that was at one point unknown, which is borrowed from the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, where he refers to it as thinking without thinking, which is interesting because that seems contradictory on the surface, but really through the being and living the philosophy, you understand it. And although we aim to put things into words to explain things better, one of the best ways of doing this, what is being suggested here, is to actually live the philosophy. Experience is the best teacher. We call this experiential learning. Now, through experiential learning, you'll recognize that you were going through this process right here, and this video will serve as a guide so that you can refer to it regularly when you go back, and perhaps if you've lost your momentum, you'd say, oh, I'm in this stage, and here's what I need to do at this stage, and change it accordingly, make the adjustments accordingly, or simply go deeply engaged in the task at hand to a deeper degree, going more present into the now, and then allowing you to automatically go through this process, because that happens as well. One can put themselves through a process like this by consciously working on each part, or unconsciously they go through a process, and I recommend a combination of both, by staying committed to the artistic expression, seeing it all the way to completion, and maintaining and building this momentum. You'll notice that this process happens unconsciously as we do that as well, which is essentially another way of saying living the philosophy. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. We are going to, in the upcoming videos, discuss this information even more so and relate it over to your goals, your visions. And by the way, if you have not already done so, I recommend watching that video on creating goals and visions, the one I made for 2022. I'll put a link in the description. I released it a few videos ago. That will help you get started. Now you recognize why I always say pick a goal, see it all the way to completion more so. Value the journey and destination. Because the process of what you go through on the journey, which is articulated here and further expressed upon reflection of this ancient wisdom by James Allen, and I'm adding my own contributions to it in this conversation, is something that we understand more so and realize more so and experience more so, and we become that person that is related to those attributes when we get to the destination. Then we can start it again with another goal and another vision and repeat the process again and again. So I trust you found this to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an affirmation. You could say, I recognize all reality is now. I have all power now, all possibility, and all possibility to be actuated upon realization and staying committed to my momentum. Upon realization, I recognize that this wisdom, contribution to my vision, is realized through momentum, through my way of being. I now identify with the thinking that is true and harmony with the vision. As a result, I further integrate the parts of my authentic and true self, bringing forth the inner voice of understanding, intuition, which allows me to be who I really am, building this internal relationship with the truth within, to be a lamp unto myself, relying upon myself and the internal world within, to externalize as ideas infused in my creative expression. This principle of purity, compassion, wisdom, and love is also a revelation of my immortal self, recognizing my oneness and unity with all, and recognizing and seeing things for how they truly are, which is in harmony, in contribution, in alignment, and one with my vision as I feel it more so through my day-to-day experience, thus further building momentum on my journey to realizing my vision. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.